Rise America.
U.S. correspondent Eric Ham, following proceedings in Washington, now joins me on the news. Glad to have you join us, Eric. Now, the FBI Director, Christopher Wray, is questioned by lawmakers on domestic terrorism and also white supremacy. You want to take us through the hearings, Eric?
Sure. This was a pretty startling hearing that we saw today because, of course, it was the first time that we would hear from one of the highest law enforcement officials who not only would be roped in on the key intelligence information regarding what took place on January 6th, but would also have an idea of how that information should have flowed to the relevant agencies. But what we saw today, Benny, was, again, an FBI director who still seemed to not understand or recognize the communication failures or how those communication failures actually took place, meaning how was it that key information from the FBI intelligence arm about domestic terrorism and about what in fact was being planned on January 6th, how that information did not in fact get to the relevant agencies, namely the Capitol Hill Police Department and the Washington, D.C. Police Department. And so what we heard from the FBI today was pretty startling in that he simply said he had no answer for that communication failure. Now, in addition to that, what we also heard from FBI Director Chris Wray was that based on the information and how things unfolded on January 6th, key terror organizations such as ISIS and even Al-Qaeda, he says, could be looking at that terror attack that took place on the U.S. Capitol and use that as a tool, a propaganda tool to galvanize their supporters, but also look for ways to attack the U.S. Capitol themselves. So it was a very eye-opening hearing where members of Congress of the Senate Judiciary Committee both all grilled the FBI director for more than 4 hours. And again, what we saw from the FBI director was he, in fact, shot down this notion from Republicans who actually posed this question that were these Antifa or terrorists on the left who were dressed in Trump gear, posing as Trump supporters, but were in fact left-wing terrorists. And the FBI director unequivocally shot that down. In addition, he did say that the events that unfolded on January 6th was in fact domestic terrorism and should be treated as such.
And this hearing today is also part of a series of congressional hearings stemming from the fallout of the January 6th Capitol Hill insurrection. Right, Eric?
That's right, Benny. In fact, we have already seen a number of hearings take place where we heard directly from military officials as well as the acting Capitol Hill police chief and the Washington, D.C. police about all of these events. And today was a cap on that because now we heard from the FBI director. And also, Benny, this was a question that was posed by Senator Mazie Hirono from Hawaii, a Democrat from Hawaii. And she pointed directly and said that we have heard from the acting U.S. attorney for Washington. We have heard from the field office of Washington, from the FBI. But today is the first time we are hearing from the head of the FBI directly about the events that transpired on January 6th. In no time in the aftermath of January 6th have we heard from the FBI director, and that is true. And she actually pressed him on that issue, asking why, in fact, we had not heard from him and why is it that he had been so quiet. Now, there has been speculation that he was basically keeping his head down so as not to incur any more of wrath or fire from the current president at the time, Donald Trump. Remember, in the aftermath of Donald Trump's loss in the presidential election, there was much talk and there were reports that we were hearing directly from the White House that Donald Trump was prepared to fire the FBI director. And so maybe that went into his decision to keep a low profile. He did not confirm or deny that today at the hearing, but that was speculation. And of course, many of the reports that we'd heard was that he was actually on his way out. And so maybe that played into it, but we didn't get any real answer as to what was the driver, why the FBI director, in the wake of such a stunning law enforcement breach, we had not heard from him until today.
Eric, interestingly, the current FBI director is a holdover from President Trump. Is President Biden planning on keeping the FBI director in his current role?
That's a really good question because, again, following on what we heard from Senator Mazie Hirono, we are told that Joe Biden has no plans of replacing the FBI director and that he will stay in his position as the head of the FBI. And of course, that is a 12-year term. And so we expect him to carry that out at least through the Biden administration. And also, Benny, what we do know is that there are plans by the FBI to make the issue of this growing white nationalist threat a key priority. And we have heard that from the FBI director even before January 6th occurred. This was something that he said was a growing threat even for the last 2 years. But right now, what we are seeing and what many members of Congress were pressing the director on was what is the role and what is the current stance, if you will, of the FBI to be able to adequately address and curb this issue. If we go back to 9/11, we saw there was a posture that law enforcement as well as the military took to address a growing terrorism from overseas. And right now, there is a concern that the United States simply isn't on the posture level to be able to adequately confront the rise in homegrown and domestic terrorism. And that is something that not only the FBI, but the Justice Department and law enforcement agencies across the country are going to have to deal with. And we heard from Merrick Garland, Joe Biden's nominee to be the head of the Justice Department, has made clear that will be his top priority if he is actually confirmed. And we do know he was voted out of the Senate just yesterday, and his full confirmation is expected to take place either this week or early next week.
Now, Eric, let's switch gears a little bit. The Johnson & Johnson vaccine is now available, which is good news. What more do we know about the distribution of the new vaccine?
Yes, that is news that is welcome both to the health community as well as to lawmakers, that now you have another vaccine to be able to combat the virus. However, we have learned that Johnson & Johnson has struggled in their production of the vaccine. We do know that beginning today, about 3.9 million doses of the vaccine will be available. And unlike Moderna and Pfizer, this is a one-shot vaccination. And so that is expected to go pretty quickly. But we're told that Johnson & Johnson will have as many as 20 million doses available by late March or next month. And also some breaking news that we got that is even more welcome is that Merck, another large pharmaceutical giant, which is a competitor of Johnson & Johnson, they will actually work together with Johnson & Johnson to produce the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. This will help Johnson & Johnson get over those production delays, and we are told with Merck working with Johnson & Johnson, they will be able to produce about 100 million doses of this vaccine. So what we're seeing is this was something that we are told was brokered by the Biden administration, that both of these pharmaceutical giants would work together to be able to get the vaccine created and get the vaccine out. So we're talking about 100 million doses, which should go a long way in ensuring herd immunity across the United States.
Eric Ham, it's been great having you on the news. Thank you so very much.
This is Arise America.